Begin.
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to my talk tonight, and thank you to Catherine for her efforts to invite me and to help prepare the for this event today. I'm currently in Hiroshima in Japan. Um, I'm not Japanese. I'm from Australia originally. My wife and I have been living in Japan for 9 years, and before that, I finished my PhD in anthropology at the Australian National University, and I've also studied linguistics and Sanskrit, and also Hindi and Urdu, as well as archaeology. Um, I lived in India for about 7 years, and so I speak a few Indian languages. And uh, the reason I first went to India was because I used to do a lot of teaching yoga. Um, a blend of Satyananda, Bihar School of Yoga, and Power Yoga, I guess. So I was introduced to yoga as a child and took an interest in it and was teaching a few classes a week by about the age of 20. So I've had a long uh, relationship with yoga, first as a health modality. I had an issue when I was a child. That's how I got introduced to it. And then um, I started teaching it and went backpacking around the world for a couple of years and lived solely off of teaching yoga in hostels and anywhere that I could find a place to pin a sign up. So I became quite familiar with, things like marketing and uh, consumer demand. And that led me into doing research about yoga. So um, all of that has in some way influenced my research over the past 10 years. And what I'll talk about tonight is one particular topic that has come to be my main focus, and that is pole dancing acrobats and looking for um, the possible origins of, or not origins so much, but how acrobats might have influenced yoga postures. Uh, so just to kind of give you some context here, this picture on the left is from Kyushu, the island of Kyushu in Western Japan, and you can see that it's a bamboo pole, and it has four ropes tied to it. If you look at the picture or the painting on the right, you can also see that it's a bamboo pole, and that there's someone dancing on top. So uh, I became quite interested in bamboo and people who climb bamboo and the history behind it. Um, and so that's what I will kind of wrap this presentation in this idea of climbing poles. Um, so yeah, just to give you some stepping stone to think about climbing poles, that we all know the fairy tale of Jack and the Beanstalk. And this is an ancient myth that's part of a larger series of myths. And but the point I'm kind of presenting to you is the idea of climbing up into the sky, into the heavens, and then returning with some treasure, some bounty for one person or for the community. And so that's an important part of the acrobatic ritual of climbing a pole. Um, and in Europe, the maypole is a very well-known event. It has ancient origins, which link to it being the axis mundi, the pole or the tree that connects the three worlds. Um, Clearly, it's a phallic or masculine symbol, and but combined with the feminine aspects, the two together depict fertility and prosperity. And this obviously happens in spring, and so why does that event happen in spring? And that relates to astronomical alignments of planets and stars, and that's what I'll talk a bit more about in the later second part of the presentation. So, and since it's Christmas, there's a very interesting link between Siberian shamans who climb poles and the origins of Santa Claus. And so coming down the chimney with a bag full of presents is somehow linked to that as well, which it is the Christmas season. So I'll come back to the Siberian shamans, but it would seem in kind of the history of pole climbing acrobatics that the Central Asia is quite possibly where it might have all began. So more broadly, the research that I have focused on explores what I refer to as the biographies of yoga and Sanskrit. And I focused within the global wellness and spiritual tourism industry. And what I've come to focus on is how yoga and Sanskrit act as symbols for identity making and policy formation, as well as soft power tools for nation branding and building, as well as post-national projects. Now, what I mean by policy formation is you can think about how India markets itself as a tourism destination for yoga holidays or yoga retreats, or anywhere around the world where there is a yoga tourism industry. That is some sort of policy. And soft power refers to the way that cultural influence can be used as an instrument to create a sense of, prestige for a country. So, for example, the International Day of Yoga that the Indian government pushed the United Nations to begin. And so that leads into a post-national project of being about, the world and kind of in a globalized sense. So that gives you some idea of how I've looked more at the politics of yoga than necessarily yoga practice. So that's why my first book, which was published earlier this year, is I used a case study of the Shanti Mandir ashram, which is in Gujarat, where I spent about almost 2 years doing field work there. And I have a second book, which is currently in production, so it will be published early next year. And that is focused on my research into people who speak Sanskrit and the idea of Sanskrit-speaking villages. So, and also it kind of compares how people who are interested in yoga and how they form some relationship with Sanskrit. So, but my current research, so I have most of a book written about this topic and what I'm presenting today. So, and I've been looking at it since about 2017 in different ways. And you can see from these images that there are different ways to climb on a pole and do something. The image in the center with all the things hanging off of the pole, that's from Indonesia. It's from the Independence Day of Indonesia in which they take a pole and they put grease on it, so it becomes very difficult to climb. And uh, if you can climb to the top, then you can take the prize that you can touch. So, and the image on the bottom left, this is from Japan also, and this is actually a part of a ritual that came from Central Asia. And if you know the mochi bowl, that soft, squishy rice bowl, so the uh, when the acrobat climbs to the top, he then throws out the mochi balls, which they symbolize prosperity and fertility, um, and some of you are in France, so you would, I think, most people know of these cave paintings, and you can see that there is the bird on top of a pole. So this is quite possibly linked to this acrobatic ritual of climbing a pole. And if you're not aware that you can see the human figure there, well, it's a male and it has an erect penis. And the symbol of an erect penis within this context, it symbolizes the ecstatic trance of the shaman, which is required for the shaman to climb up to the end of heaven. And that's what the name of this ritual pole climbing act in Japan is called. It's called Ten no Shime, which means climbing to the end of heaven. And then you can see the image on the bottom right. It's from Nagasaki. There's a fox, an acrobat wearing a fox costume, and he has just released a chicken, and the chicken flies across the crowd and lands somewhere. And that chicken, it represents the phoenix or the sun in the sky. So and that links in with the maypole. And so basically what happened was that I started with something very small, and over the last 10 years it's grown to basically become a global ethno-historical study of pole climbing rituals. So, oh, and the image on the painting on the top right corner, this is from India. And so you can see that there's some acrobat on the ground, which it looks like it's doing the scorpion pose from Hatha Yoga. And so it's images like this that made me begin to think, what are the connections possibly between acrobatics and yoga? So, the research I've been doing the last few years is I started to think about the possible expansion of pole acrobatics out from India and expanding outward. So when I started looking at pole acrobatics and looking in Sanskrit texts and Buddhist texts, it became quite clear that there was a transmission that at least came out of India and went in different directions. And so I started following through primary texts in many languages, and then also looking with Japanese texts at acrobats and street performers and ancient rituals, trying to see if I could get them to meet in the middle somewhere. And one way this has occurred is, if you think about it, a long time ago when people were traveling across the ocean, there were also performers who would entertain the people on the boats. And this is an image of a Korean politician or diplomat who was traveling to Japan. And so there were pole climbing acrobats that were also, they worked, pulling the sails in or tightening the ropes. And so this is just one way in which acrobats have been involved in, long distance travel. And so what I've been looking at are these three routes that acrobats came to travel across Asia towards Japan. And uh, if you see the images on the left and right, this is actually from a bow that does not shoot arrows, it actually shoots bullets. And the image you can see that's these acrobats, and they came from Tang, the Tang dynasty, so from China, and this was a gift that came around the 8th century from China to Japan, which is when acrobatics first arrived in Japan, actually. Um, but it's possible that they actually link all the way back to this one group in India called the Kols. And so they are an indigenous tribe to India. Um, and they come mostly from across like central India. And they have quite complex uh, religion, which ultimately kind of resides with a mother goddess and a sky father god. So, but they are famous for their pole climbing rituals. So, and if you just focus on the bold font, in Japanese there's a term enkantogi, which this basically refers to acrobatic tricks on a bamboo pole. And the reason I'm showing you this is that Tianzhu is this was the ancient Chinese word for India, and so Tian meaning heaven, but the second character in that word, it also means bamboo and bamboo pole. And the people that were known for climbing bamboo poles are called Chandala. And Chandala Vanshika or Chandala Vamsha refers to the group of people who climbed and did acrobatic performances on poles. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that many people, you can find quite a few books on the history of pole dancing, for example, and they will say something probably in the first couple of pages that claims pole dancing, the origins of pole dancing were Chinese pole acrobats. But there is, in ancient Chinese texts, it's rather quite clear that this pole dancing, pole acrobatics actually came from India uh, more than 2,000 years ago. So, and one of the earliest textual evidence of professional pole dancing in South Asia comes from a text called the Vajrasane Samhita, and it says Vayave Chandala Karmanam Antarikshaya Vamshanarthanam. And so this is part of the Purusha Meda, which was a sacrifice of people. And so a Chandala acrobat was sacrificed to the wind, and to the air, a bamboo pole dancer. Now, as I mentioned, Chandala is the name of the tribe, and Vamshanartanam is a bamboo pole dancer. And this is confirmed as a profession. So people would do this for money, for their livelihood, because in a later commentary, the term Vamsha Agra Nrita Jivin is used to qualify the acrobat and the bamboo pole dancer as an occupation that one did on the tip of a bamboo pole. So this would mean that perhaps 2,500 years ago, if not earlier, there were people in India or South Asia that were professional pole dancing acrobats. One of the uh, other things that I found, which kind of made it put some human element to it, is a memorial stone from the 17th century. So now we come forward in time or to the closer day, but this memorial stone is located a couple of hours north of Bangalore, and the memorial stone was placed at the spot where Yelika died. So Yelika was the name of an acrobat, a pole dancing acrobat, and and she died while she fell from the pole that she was dancing on. And so the memorial stone says Eka Langika Dita Vamsham Abiruya Tasya Upari Parivatitva Akase Chankamana Nachatiche Vagayati. And means a certain female tumbler climbed a pole, turned somersaults thereon, and balanced herself on the tip of a pole, danced and sang. So the reason this stone was placed there is because it would have thought it might have appeased Yelika's ghost. She might not have turned wrathful. So now this is the spark, so to speak, that got me going in this research. One Saturday evening, just before coming to Japan, I was looking for things to do with things on YouTube, and this video played of this pole acrobatics, and I'd never seen it before. I'd never heard of it. And if you type in this word down the bottom, Malakam, onto YouTube, you'll most likely find this same video. And it kind of, I was blown away by it. The athleticism, the strength, the agility, the fearlessness is quite something. And so I became instantly obsessed by Malakam. And so Malakam, it's a Marathi word which means wrestler's pole, but it's developed out of an earlier Sanskrit word stambashrama, which means pole exercise. And if you want, you can read this one article that was published in the Journal of Yoga Studies in 2023, which was a result of my exploration of Malakam and its possible connections to yoga through wrestling. So yeah, there's a one from the chapter 7 of the Malapurana, which was a possibly 12th century kind of wrestling manual. It says Akadasya samipasta ye karya swarakila tatsarvam katishyami yogakshemartha siddhaye. Sounds that should be performed traditionally around the gym. I will tell all of them for the sake of accomplishing the goal of yoga kshema. So you can see this word yoga in the compound yoga kshema, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But so Malakam is an international sport. You can compete in it for your country. It is used to brand in a soft power way India through the Incredible Malakam, which is a subset of the Incredible India tourism campaign. India is trying to have Malakam included as a competitive sport in the modern Olympic Games. However, it has a stiff competitor in the International Pole Sport Federation, which has more of the boxes ticked for being included. Malakam was a non-competitive sport at the Berlin Olympics and also at the Tokyo Olympics. So it has an interesting kind of, and it also has Malakam days 1 week before the International Day of Yoga. So it's a sport that its biography, it claims that it's come from wrestling, but that seems to be a sanitized history. And even if you watch videos of it today, you'll see you think, "Wow, this looks like pole dancing." So it's quite interesting, and you can see from these images that the one with the green background, the picture that is acrobats dancing. You can see someone is playing the drums, and there's other music, and so you can see how aesthetically it's the modern day Malakam is essentially pole acrobatics, but they don't mention that they want to keep it within this kind of hyper masculine wrestling kind of context. And this is an encyclopedia of Indian physical culture, and in the Hindi and Marathi and Gujarati editions, it has 10 volumes, but there's an English volume that it's only 1 volume, so it compresses it a lot. But what I want to show you here is just some of the things that you can do on a pole. You can shoot a gun or a bow and arrow, or spin around with knives and swords. And this is all straight out of tribal indigenous acrobatic performances that have to do with ritual. And you can see on the right column, or sorry, the right side at least, the images which no doubt make you think of Surya Namaskar or sun salutations. And the reason for including this is that, so the name of this sequence of postures in this text from like 1915, I think, is Surya Bedana Vyayama. So the second word, Vyayama, it means exercise. And Surya Bedana, it means piercing the sun. So this was an early name for Surya Namaskar before it became sun salutations. And you can see in these, sorry, in the left, the sepia colored image, that says yoga asana in above the 3 pictures of people sitting with their legs crossed. And there's also a malakam that's a rope. So, but I'm mostly just pointing out how yoga and yoga asana becomes included within this wrestling kind of framework. And again, here up the top, with next to above the pictures with the boys on the top of the pole, it says asana. And so what the main point here is that the people who promoted malakam and wrestling, they say that there's no real kind of link between yoga, but that because the wrestlers are so agile and strong that they can perform the postures on the pole. And here's just some more images. You can see some quite a lot of skill. And to point something else out, because I'm sure many of you know that the birth of modern postural yoga was a syncretic or a synthesis of European gymnastics and calisthenics with um, martial wrestling from India and Persia. And you can see how this physical education manual from 1830, how similar it is to these exercises from the encyclopedia. So it's just kind of a little entry into the background of the my research. Some highlights, I guess. But what I want to focus on now is exploring ancient acrobatic influence on yoga's postures and how I've come to understand the acrobat as a type of magician or sorcerer or necromancer. And it's important for us to kind of change our perception about what an acrobat was to perceive how the acrobat might have influenced more complex and dynamic yoga postures from developing. And this has a lot to do with the cosmogenesis, which was one of the main reasons why acrobats were, in many cases, the most important ritual participant. So, for millennia, ancient acrobats have been the most, as I said, the most important ritual participants. And this was because their supernatural abilities at religious functions gave them enviable prestige, fame, and wealth. However, the the problem is the problem that we are discussing today is that complex and dynamic yoga postures have existed for more than 2,500 years before appearing in the context of hatha yoga. So we're left to think: is there a link? And so both terms, acrobat and yogin, are in some ways distracting analytical categories. Um, if I say acrobat, then you already have an image in your mind of what I'm talking about. And similar with a yogin. But in order to go through this, we need to kind of put those distinctions to the side at least. And um, so here you'll see most of the images involve juggling, and there's one instance from ancient Greece where juggling glass balls was actually the reflection of the sunlight through the glass balls was thought to stimulate healing. It was a ritual for regaining health. Um, so when we see jugglers, it's not just to be entertained, but it's the supernatural kind of ability to bend reality that the ancient acrobat was so important for. And one of the main things was for ordering chaos and ensuring fertility and prosperity. And this has been something that was occurring, more than 4,000 years ago. And in some ways, it relates to Nietzsche's ideal man of the future, the Übermensch. So in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Zarathustra says, der Mensch ist ein Ziel genug zwischen Tier und Übermensch. And in some ways, this relates to the ideals of the yogin, to become a superman, to become a master of the self. And the reason I'm mentioning Zarathustra is that very early on in the story, Zarathustra comes to a town and everyone is looking up, and there's a rope walker. And if you think about a rope, if we turn the rope up, there are many crossovers between crossing a rope and climbing a pole. And so now there's an interesting thing here. Um, there's a bit of academic disinterest in exploring and discussing the possible acrobatic influence on yoga postures. And that's because for some people, it seems to be a taboo topic that might tarnish someone's perception of yoga's pure image. Acrobats are untrustworthy since they profit from deception. And they're linked to begging, theft, and prostitution. And there's also a kind of idea that there's no evidence. So, but if you don't look, then how do you know whether there's evidence or not? So, now the next few slides, I'm going to throw some words at you. Don't worry too much about it. The impression I want to leave on you is the complexity of the historical data around acrobats in India. And so there are many names, and for different tribes who performed possibly specific performances. It's like some only climbed poles, others, were known for their dancing without a pole. And maybe it was only the women that climbed poles in some, and the men did rope walking in others. And you have different names for the same group, but in the north or the south. And a lot of these performers were also worked as spies. So they worked in espionage and also as security. So they weren't just entertainers, or they weren't just part of like ritual in some way. And some of these tribes became well known for prostituting their girls. So they had to choose: will you climb the pole and dance and be a prostitute, or not? And for some of these groups, these tribes today, in fact, they're still doing this. So, and you can also find in old census data information about acrobats and snake charmers. And the point here is to demonstrate that there's a crossover between acrobats and wrestlers, or, as you can see in the bottom left, the prize fighters. And I'll explain some of the history behind that in a minute. But so you can see here in the middle, the Pewan Gopals, they practiced gymnastics and performed feats on long poles. And they also had the tom-tom drum, which would announce the arrival of the acrobatic troupe. But then there's also a group called the Kolhatis from Maharashtra, who also climbed on long bamboo poles. So it's just kind of very complicated in terms of trying to understand who these groups were and are today also. And so these groups, they came from Maharashtra mostly. And this word, the Jeshti Mala, this is a Sanskrit word. And this refers to the Gopals. So it's a synonym. And the pehlevan and kam. Pehlevan, it's the Persian word for wrestler, and kam, it's like malakam, the wrestler's pole. And so this refers to this kolhati group. And then you have the naats, which is kind of a higher order. So this is the family tree, basically, that I've devised to kind of understand. So as I mentioned before, the Chandala tribe from this Vedic text of being offered to the wind and the air. These are the earliest, it would seem. And then over time they kind of take on different names, different specialities as well, and in different regions. And so you're left with this Pehlevan being wrestlers and Kam being doing more pole acrobatics. And so the Pehlevan, or the wrestlers, this is where the pole, the wrestler's pole comes from. But it would seem that it came from this more complex family tree of wrestler, performer, acrobats. So, yeah, one question is, how might the prestige and social rank of ancient acrobats have influenced the adoption of complex and dynamic physical postures into Hatha Yoga? Now, this is obviously from Egypt, and you can see that these women are doing back bends, some sort of chakrasana. Now, this is part of a ritual, and we know that because there's a man on the right playing a harp. So this was part of an acrobatic ritual dance. And this relates to Nut, who symbolizes both the heavens and earth and the cosmic cycle of day and night. And her arched body stretched across the sky represents the celestial dome. It's possible that Egyptian yoga, if you want to call it that, had some influence on Indian yoga. I have written one article about that, about Kemetic yoga. You can find it online. And this links in with Ma'at, which is a concept which is similar to the Indian idea of dharma. So it's about the principle of cosmic order, truth, justice, balance, and rightness. And so Ma'at was a goddess who was you could see the hieroglyphs for Ma'at. It's a woman with the bird and the sun, or with a feather in the hair and the pole. And so the pole obviously is important because the pole symbolizes cosmic order and justice. So, okay, if you're not really familiar with ancient Indian history, the timeline, the far right of the page is the modern day, and going back further in time, you end up with like the late Vedic period and the early Vedic period. And so this idea of yoga kshema is first found in the Rig Veda from the early Vedic period. And so this, if you're not aware, is the earliest mention of the word yoga. But before we talk about that, it's important to understand that the tribes in the Rig Veda were this wasn't some peaceful vegetarian farm where people just hung out and stretched in the mornings. And the early Rig Veda society was one that essentially revolved around waiting for the rains to finish, and in autumn to go off and steal cattle, steal women, and plunder the the reserves, the property of other tribes, and smash their enemies. Um, and this god Indra is the main god that uh, in the Rig Veda. So, and he is kind of equates with Zeus in ancient Greece. Um, so this is the picture on the left. This is a battle between two rival groups of sannyasis in the late 16th century. And so, we quite often have this idea of yogis and sannyasis being quite peaceful, but they weren't a lot of the time. Um, and so, from this early Rig Vedic culture, yoga actually means a period of time for martial action, of destroying enemies, as I said. And yeah, so this basically, if you focus on the in the middle in the squares, yoga was a time for action and kshema was a time for rest. And so basically, yoga kshema is this dynamic, static kind of binary where yoga doesn't directly mean war, but it means martial action, and kshema means the time when you get to enjoy the fruits of your action. So, and yoga, the idea of yoking, that yoga is a cognate with this, meant to yoke your body to your armor, to your weapons. So it's a very violent genesis of the word yoga. Um, the idea of the more popular idea of yoga being the uniting of the Jivatman with the Para-Atman, or like the individual soul with the cosmic soul. This is a much later. This is a late Vedic period Upanishadic concept, which is not the original meaning of yoga. So, um, and just to give you an example, so Indra was sometimes called Dios Putra, or the Sky Father. And his father before that was an even earlier Indo-European idea of the Sky Father and the Earth Mother. And Indra is known in many countries even today. And you can see this from Kathmandu in the photo on the right, that there's a pole raising festival that occurs around the same time as the Maypole happens in Europe. And you can see here the Pahi Kshema Uta Yoge Varam no Yuyam Pata Swastibi Sadanaha. So this is from the Rig Veda, and it's a part of a prayer that's asking for Indra to protect one group in both peace and war. So I have many examples of yoga and kshema to kind of give an kind of really drive home the idea that yoga actually means something that perhaps you didn't know. But I'm just going to skip over them, and you can read them when you have the PDF. So you even find it in the Bhagavad Gita. One thing I'll point out is Ambedkar was the architect of the Indian Constitution, and he basically he describes the Bhagavad Gita as a political treatise camouflaged in poetic verse and philosophical language. And what he's talking about is that during the Mauryan Empire, the Buddhists gained political favor through the Emperor Ashoka. And during that time, the Brahmins were, pushed to the side. And so when the Gupta Empire rose to replace the Mauryan Empire. Over those several centuries, that is the time in which the Bhagavad Gita was produced. And essentially, it is a text to justify the return of the Brahminical religion and socio-political construct, which is probably quite different to what you've thought about it as being an inspirational text. So there's more to it, is the point. And this follows through the idea of yoga and being about active, righteous, violent action is something that follows through all the way. And then you even find it in this wrestling text, Yoga Kshema. All right, so, and here's so this is from the Malapurana, which is this 12th-ish century wrestling text, and it describes yoga as Mala Yuddha. So Mala is wrestler, and Yuddha it just means war, basically, fighting. And it describes these wrestling asanas as fighting postures or modes of fighting. And the reason for these modes of fighting is that the wrestler's intention is to be victorious across the three realms, the Trailokya Vijayi. And this occurs through Jita Shrama, or victorious effort. So, yeah, Yoga Kshema is a perennial kind of context, which is quite often overlooked. Now, here I want to point out in this image, in the red square, you can see, well, behind the guy that's holding the Indian clubs, it looks like someone is doing some sort of plank. And so here you can zoom in and see it a little better. And I've also included an image from another picture, and you can see here you can see how the one on the far right in the red square, how he's got like the kind of, what's the word? The things that you can raise your hands up and do push-ups. And this is basically Surya Namaskar developed out of Persian-Indian wrestling. This is the point of what I'm showing you. Where is it? I might have... I don't know where it's gone. And the bow and arrow looking image where the guy's kind of got it close together and then he pulls it. This is actually not a string or, intestines. It's metal. It's chain metal. And it's kind of a training implement for, working the shoulders and the back muscles. But it's also part of a ritual dance. But you can also see how this wrestler is doing some sort of handstand with the legs crossed. And so there's a lot of crossover between yoga and wrestling, and then also acrobatics. So how are we doing for time? Maybe I'll just finish this section, then we can do the questions. So the Manusmriti, if you don't know this text, is part of the Dharma Shastra literature, which is about moral duties. And so there was this idea that, the body is kind of a small version of the universe. And so you had to uphold your own dharma, and that would then equate with universal dharma. So, and in the Manu Smriti, it describes a yogin as someone who is twice born and a male, and someone who has lived according to the the very kind of complicated ritual rules or and then if you wanted to become you might know the term vanaprastha, someone who goes and lives in the forest. So you could only become a vanaprastha if you had fulfilled all those other obligations and you had gray hair and wrinkles. This was the time when yoga would start, according to Manusmriti. And then you could enter the forest and attend to this ascetic yoga. But that meant getting rid of, you weren't allowed to take even, your teddy bear and suitcase with you. You went just with the clothes on your back. And it does say in the Manusmriti that the wife could go with the husband if she wanted, or she could stay with the children, the grandchildren. But I can't imagine going off into the forest 2,000 years ago. It would have been very difficult. So this is a very different idea of ascetic yoga, but it still is about a time for acquiring powers. But there was no standing or dynamic postures. It was just sitting by a tree, basically. So you had to live outdoors, no shelter, and you had to sleep at the roots of the trees, and you could only forage for food. You weren't allowed to beg with your cup. So it was very difficult, and you should also increase the hardship by wearing wet clothes in winter and sitting near to 5 fires in summer. And then what you were meant to do is, so this is where the internalization of the earlier Vedic ritual was occurring. And so you would install the 3 sacred fires, and they are the sacrificial fire, the household fire, and the ancestral fire. And you had to remain homeless and not have a fire to keep you warm in winter. You should not talk, and you should only eat fruits and roots. So very, very difficult. So the meaning of yoga has come a long way from being a time for martial action to, today as a lifestyle option that's worth billions of dollars. So I've written a few articles about temple yoga and things like that in Japan. So you might like to look at them. I'll just finish this section to describe the conceptual framework that I'm basically trying to outline, the contortionist turn. So that's what I call it. And what I understand is that the reason that Hatha yoga postures became more dynamic and complex and look more like acrobatic things is that this was a way to gain symbolic power by borrowing from the prestige that acrobatic rituals involved. And so there are different ways to imagine a yogi or an ascetic or even an acrobat, as you can see from these images. And the cartoon is actually, the comic is a famous Buddhist tale. So the young man, he falls in love with the beautiful acrobat, and he's from a wealthy merchant banker family, and he believes that because he's rich that she will want to marry him. And then she says to him, no, I am already quite rich. I have performed for many kings and they've given me land and many jewels. I don't need your money. And so it goes on like that. So basically the proposition is that relies on this concept of yoga and kshema as power and prosperity. And there was an important shift that occurred. Many of you would know the term Jivan Mukti, about gaining liberation while alive. This concept developed at the same time that Hatha yoga was also developing. and so they're quite closely linked. And so there was a shift from videha mukti, which meant you had to wait until the time of death to be liberated. Now that so the body went from being valued or perceived as being a hindrance, something that got in the way of liberation, to becoming a vehicle for liberation. And so I think that's actually a very important piece of the contortionist turn in terms of understanding how acrobatics could have come to then also be seen as a valuable symbolic part. And the way that so there were merchant guilds and also yoga guilds and acrobat guilds, and the way that they all interacted was through trade, ritual, entertainment, security, and espionage. There are accounts of caravans with 700 or more camels and trailers going from across the Silk Roads. And so that meant that there was money invested in goods being transported safely, in people being transported safely, and also entertained along the way. And so the acrobats worked for the merchant guilds, and at some point the merchant guilds and the yoga guilds, so like the haṭhayogins, who basically kind of started hatha yoga, they were merchant guilds, and they came to run the trade networks and trade centers of India. And they also came to run the espionage industry as well. And so the acrobats and entertainers were part of that espionage network. So I think that through the wrestler acrobats, this otherworldly supernatural performers of acts of awe, who had an ambiguous social position, it afforded them a unique social power. And so through their physical strength, endurance, agility, grace, skill, concentration, and fearlessness, it's possible that these were reasons why the yoga guilds, the akadas, started to adopt their physical postures. So maybe I can leave it there. We can have some questions if we've got some.
Yes, we have a question from Olena. Olena, do you want to ask your question, please? Or shall we read in the chat?
Something. So, so this question by Olena: is there any evidence that ancient acrobats were also practicing deep meditation, or instead mainly only wrestling and body skill was required from them to perform? So I will talk more about this after the questions, but it depends what we kind of. We will have to agree on what we understand by meditation. Meditation in the sense of, sitting cross-legged, chanting Om. I would probably say no. But the ritual movement of the body, that is a type of meditation. It's trance-inducing. If you think about like the whirling dervishes from Iran, this is perhaps a way to think about the way that the acrobat body kind of got closer to some sense of meditation.
And we could
But
also relate to BKS Iyengar when he was talking about meditation in action through these
Yes, yes.
exercious asanas.
Yes, yes, exactly. After in the next part, I will talk more and give some clear examples of what I mean from this as well. So,
You didn't mention the Chinese lion dance
mm,
because they are
the,
also on poles, and they are jumping together from one pole to another, and it's
yes, yes,
really very, very acrobatic. So
yes,
maybe that
yes,
was part of it.
yes, yeah, definitely. So the the lion acrobat dance is part of an ancient ritual of sorcery. It has to do with connecting to not only otherworldly powers, but to planets and stars. In fact, also even recreating an ancient journey across the the night sky, which I will show you.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
And also we have the Kalaripayat. Um,
Ah, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure that they are using poles, but they are flying people.
Yes. Yes. There's certainly the again. That's something that, to be honest, I haven't had the chance to look too closely at. But
Mm.
I mean, I
We were
know that.
lucky. Yeah. We were lucky enough 1 year in Zinal, in the European Union of Yoga Congress. They were invited, and we had the
Mm,
opportunity to practice with them for the whole week. But of course,
mm, mm,
they
mm,
had also they gave us some demonstration, and it was
mm,
really amazing to see how
mm, mm.
they are able to jump in space.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's I mean they're incredible, and it brings that idea of religion and martial activity together, and the discipline as well. So,
Yeah,
but
because
yeah,
going back to the meditation question,
mm,
of course, you need to be totally concentrated and more than concentrated in order to
mm.
be able to realize such a feast.
And I think that that's a really great point, because if you th the qualities that we think of yogis as having control over their body, having a type of fearlessness, being able to endure hardship, having a discipline. That again, there is these crossovers between the yogi and the acrobat wrestler and the martial artist that we often, I don't think, consider how it can be connected. Mm.
But this is also something that we can encounter sometime during the yoga teacher training programs,
Mm.
because for some schools, when they are practicing hatha yoga, um, they are working on such postures which are very difficult, very
Yeah,
acrobatics,
yeah.
even though maybe the future yoga teachers won't meet pupils, students who would be
Mm-mm-mm.
able to practice this, but the teacher has to be able to do it in order to be in full control of their mind and body
Mm.
and spirit.
Mm-mm-mm. Absolutely. Yeah. So before, maybe 5 years before, I used to think that there was, there's separate groups. There was wrestlers, yogis, acrobats. But now I found more evidence that actually these groups, it's very difficult to kind of separate them, because there were not only, the acrobat acrobat groups performing at big agricultural festivals, but there were also yogi groups doing the same things, the same sort of performances. And so, it becomes very, very hard to find, if we want to make clear distinction, it's difficult. Yeah.
Mm,
So,
agree. Do we have some questions or comments?
Um, Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Catherine. That was my question. Thanks for your first reactions. Maybe just to specify, and if you will talk further about that, then I'm not insisting that you can speak now, but I'm just curious about any mention of connecting those physical exercises with some sort of meditation, because yes, we can assume that all of those rituals are helping to get to a certain state, but is any written evidence that it is also a part of the practice?
Do you mean the practice of yoga or the practice of
No,
ancient acrobatic ritual?
yeah, you were talking about wrestling sort of
Ah,
manuals. I'm
yeah,
curious
yeah,
about those.
yeah, yes, yeah, yeah. In the wrestling manuals, for sure. Yeah, so there are in I think it's like chapter 3 of the Mala Purana. It's um the different type of wrestler has a specific seated asana that they are prescribed to sit in, and also a specific pranayama that they are given. So before they begin training, there's some type of meditation, some type that, and also a ritual in which the god of wrestling is honored. So, but it's very the text is kind of vague, but it definitely each like you have the big heavyweight wrestler, and then you have the smaller weight class, and so they have different. Basically, the that wrestling manual is describing the lifestyles, the diets, the training programs that each type of wrestler should follow if they don't want to get injured. You know, if you're a smaller wrestler, you can move faster, so you have different techniques that you should focus on compared to like a heavyweight wrestler. So yeah. So there is a meditative element that's mentioned, though, explicitly mentioned, but it's a bit vague on the details. Yeah. So, so should I continue? I should. Yeah. Okay. I'll
Yes,
just.
please. Let's go. Let's go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Um. There's so many slides. I feel like I might run out of time if I get through them. So I'm just going to start here, and we I'm going to show you a lot of pictures, kind of a little bit quickly, just to give you a flavor of some of the. I have so many images, and I want to show you, the crossover between wrestlers and acrobats and yogis. Um, so here you can see. So we're in this image here when the wrestler or the acrobat is facing down on the pole. This is a secret representation of Shakti or Kundalini Shakti in these images. Um, and this pole, the one on the right, and the 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 bowls on the head, while this is obviously an amazing acrobatic feat, these poles sorry, the bowls are also used in tantric ritual as a place to store the energy that is created in ritual. So it's difficult for me to know exactly whether that was the case in this particular photo or if it's just, balancing something on a head and that's amazing. So, but you can see here, you have, excuse me, is this an acrobat or a fakir or a yogi on the left? Um, they all seem to wear similar things, and uh, which makes it difficult. It's a bit hard to see, but there's actually like a dagger, a knife that the guy doing the handstand is looking at. Um, and it would seem that the sword dance possibly started in India, worked its way across to the Mediterranean and ancient Greece. So in ancient Greek, there are texts that mention Indian acrobats, and in Rome also. And then it would seem that the sword dance came back to India. So you can see here, this guy sitting on a bed of nails. The one thing that I wonder is that you can have some fakir, some yogi sitting on a bed of nails in a marketplace, and it's not very interesting to look at. But if you then heard the tom tom drum, dum da dum da dum dum da dum da dum, and you knew that that was the acrobats coming, you would forget all about the guy just sitting on a bed of nails, and you would go and look at the pole acrobats. And there is one story from ancient Greece. I forget who the playwright was, but he was deep into the act 2 of his play, and the dom got louder, and everyone just left the playhouse to go see the acrobats. And so yeah, it's kind of funny, I think. But yeah, so here are just lots of images. And you can see in some of them, there are some clearly like quite yogic kind of postures being performed. Even on the branches of a banyan tree. And then you can see in the black and white one right in the front, someone has even swords in their mouth as they're doing some sort of shalabhasana or something. This is a hook swinging, which is an ancient rite of solar worship, where hooks are put into the back and you are suspended by your own flesh. Again, you can see. So the picture on the right, are they wrestlers or acrobats? It's hard to know, because there's a drum, or did they just have because sometimes they would have drumming and music while they trained. So and here you can see that there's a pole climbing acrobat, and he has 2 children on the pole with him. And some more with the goat or the cow. So this one is from a temple wall in Chidambaram, which is has a long history of like temple acrobats, or acrobats who performed rituals at the temple. And you can see here, so here's the pole. It's a bit hard to see, right? But so that's why I've highlighted it. And then you can the stabilizing ropes. And then this is one acrobat, and she has discs in her hand. And there's another acrobat, and she is holding, that's a baby connected by the rope. And then there is a dynamic spinning of the baby. And then this is a drummer. So that's what it looks like. You can see it. So yeah, you can see someone doing some back bend and handstands. And so this one on the left is from Fort William, which is basically Chennai today. More swallowing of swords. And this is on the right, this is the famous yogi trick of planting a mango seed, and then magically a mango tree starts to grow. But these were all things that yogis and acrobat performers did. So they were kind of doing the same things. This is the sword dance. You can see the more clearly the dagger underneath the woman doing the backbend. So there's, and here you can see on the right the baby being swung by the rope, and what will happen is that the baby will be dropped at the climax of the ritual. So this is not an acrobatic performance. This is actually part of an important ritual, and that has all got to do with fertility, and so the baby would be dropped, and that's why the guy has his two arms raised up. And you can see that it, I think this, if you halfway up the pole, I think this is meant to be peacock feathers, because you can see in the other one, the image on the left, there are peacocks, and they are basically a symbol of royalty, and royalty represents the sun, and all of this. A very complex history of peacocks. Peacocks originated in India, and they traveled to the Mediterranean thousands of years ago through trade as an important symbol. But there's also this white bird, and you have to think, like, what is this white bird doing there? I'll come to it, but there are also these accoutrements that you can see the rings. So spin the ring around. There's a ledge to sit on, and also you can see how there are different ideas, but one, that there was a metal spike that connected into the bamboo pole and the plate, and it could spin around. And I have black and white footage of this from like 1920. You can find it on British Pate, if you know that archive. If you type in like Indian acrobats, you'll find it. But so yeah, and here's some variations of this same image. They're all quite similar. And so these were, yeah, a specific subsect of these acrobatic tribes from South India. And so here, yeah, yogis or acrobats or a bit of both. It's so this is I showed you part of this image before, and you can, if you look in this picture up in the top left, the Mandala acrobats. Mandala is a town or an area in central India where these acrobat tribes were from. And if you look closely, hopefully you can see it clearly, but the boy on the far right of the image, he has a bird costume. And if you look at the directly underneath that photo, in between the drummers, there is a bird. You think, okay, what's that about? I'll come to that a bit later. But then I just want to show you the images of the person doing a backbend on someone's head while that person stands on a sword, and also another type of scorpion pose. And then, yeah, you see the plate on the right side. This is the one I showed you before with the origins of Surya Namaskar. So yeah, here's a close-up of that image, and you can see the feathers. So the Nut women the Nuts were one of these acrobatic tribes, and the Nut women were called kabutari, which is a word for pigeon, and that refers, if you've ever seen the tumbler or the roller pigeon, when it walks, it does somersaults, or even when it's flying, it just spins in the air. And that is thought to refer to the flirting manner in which the girls on the poles would, they would do the flips on the poles and also attract the male customers, because the nut women particularly were prostituted. And you can also see, in Arunachal Pradesh, which is northeast India, they have a particular festival that is it's a festival, lots of people have fun, but it's an important agricultural fertility festival where there's this bird dance. And if you think back to Nut, with the symbol of the feather, this could be some connection. And here's the close-up of these images. Down below, there are 3 articles from the Journal of Yoga Studies, which, when you have the PDF, you could just click on these, and I've embedded the link to it. So, yeah, if you want to know more about the Malakam and yoga and the wrestling and yoga, then Surya Namaskar and wrestling, then these are 3 good articles. This is I love this panel at the bottom. It just shows from Japan all of these different ways that bamboo pole acrobatics was happening about 150 years ago. I used to live in Kyoto before living in Hiroshima, and we had a big bamboo grove next to us, and I would walk in it every day and just think, wow, how do people climb up this? It really inspired me, actually, to look more into it. Okay. So the Manasalasa and the Malapurana, these are the 2 wrestling texts. The Manasalasa is it's an encyclopedic text for a king, and it covers all of the things that a king needs to know about how to run a kingdom. And that includes having a stable of wrestlers. And so it would seem that the Malapurana, which is a later text, because it expands considerably on the wrestling in the Manasalasa. So it talks about how the wrestlers were a symbol of power and prestige for a king, and they had a coach, and the training schedule was split between the morning and the evening. Now, the story of the Malapurana, it begins in Gujarat, up near Delmal, Mehsana, Modera, just north of Ahmedabad. And so this is historical, not mythical. Basically, they left their hometown in the early 12th century, and they traveled up to Delhi, and then they went through Mathura, because they were devotees of Krishna, and they traveled down through Indore and through the Vindhya mountains and the Satpura mountains, and then they found their way to Kalyani Fort, which is where the Manasalasa was published, and they split off and went to different places. All of the places that I've kind of colored in orange, these are all, well, not all, but some of the more important historical places where acrobats came from or are linked to. And this Basva Kalyan Fort, so this is where it's located. It's like sort of halfway between Pune and Hyderabad. And this kind of corridor was very famous for wrestling. And Kolhapur that kola, it links to the word for bamboo, and this the red dot down the bottom, that's where that Yelika's memorial stone was placed. So now this is what the fort looks like. You can go there today and walk around it. And so this is there was the training gymnasium somewhere in this fort for the wrestlers. And if you read more of the Manasilasa, it talks about like, well, you need dancers and you need other entertainment, not just for fun and merrymaking, but for rituals as well, for magic and sorcery. And so there were actually just like the wrestlers were given annual contracts, employment contracts, the acrobats and dancers were also given employment contracts. And so what I think might have happened is that the acrobats were training and the wrestlers were training, and the acrobats had a pole, and maybe there's some back and forth between the two groups, like, oh, you couldn't climb up this pole, like you're not strong enough. And maybe the wrestlers, they came to see the benefit in including the climbing a pole as part of the training that will strengthen their body, because that's what the text says, is if you climb the pole, it will develop your whole body, it will give you whole body strength. So there are some more photos of the what the fort looks like today. Yeah, so there's a few options. Maybe these wrestlers that left Gujarat and came to the fort in Kalyan, maybe they brought Stamba Shrama with them. I don't think that happened. I think they maybe picked it up, possibly, when they went through the Vindhya Satpura mountain ranges, because that is a very famous area for pole acrobats. I'll just go back to this other slide to show you what I mean. This one. Oops, where'd it go? Sorry. Oh, this one. So the Vindhya Mountains here, this is that one of the early slides where I mentioned the chandalas and their being offered to the air and to the wind. This is where their villages were 2,500 years ago. This is where they did their that's where they're famous for coming from. So to give you, to put a bit more hatha yoga into this talk, the hatha yoga mentions these sthanas. These sthana links to the English word to stand, and so the sthanas in the Hatha Yoga Pradipaka and the Malapurana both mention 5 primary sthanas, but the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it's locating metaphysical concepts: Mula Sthana, Brahma Sthana, Yoni Sthana, Uttama Sthana, Shiva Sthana. And the numbers are the chapters and verses next to it. But in the Malapurana, while it also explains 5 body part positions, the Panchasthanani, these are for actions of war, the Yuddha Karmani. And so they're the shoulder, the arm, the thigh, the waist, and the knee. These are the important sthanas for. So the sthana concepts are quite different. What do you want? No, you can't have it. So the analysis, this basically talks about the the asana. This is the analysis of asana and sthana in the Mala Purana, and the main point that I want you to focus on is the top half, the techniques, and to show you how asana is mentioned, but it's at the end of the list of techniques. So it's basically in Sanskrit text, the important things come first. So asana as an overall thing is not as important. What's important is learning timing and how to kind of be spatio-visual, and then also how to hold your opponent. So basically, as I was saying, the most important thing for a wrestler was the footwork, the arms, the movement of the palms of the hands. Grappling is very important, and also the transition between being stationary, sthana, and moving, chadi. And so this was thought to be the links to like graceful, coordinated movement, very much like dancing. And so, actually, in dancing, in performance texts, there are it gets very interesting. The even more of the crossovers between acrobatics and kind of more classical ideas of dancing. So there are acrobatic modes of dancing, which are more kind of explosive movements and jumping, and then not only are they for entertainment, but they are also part of ritual. So I think that the contortionist turn is just a conceptual framework that I've kind of developed to think about this in different ways, and how Hatha Yoga might have incorporated these things into its performative repertoire. And it doesn't seem to be that there's a simple matter of haṭhayogins adopting physical movements of acrobats. That's what I used to think, that like maybe they even stole these things, but I've come to think that it's far more complicated and far more nuanced. But there are so many different ways in which the historical data shows that yogi groups were doing the same sort of performances at the same sort of agricultural festivals, which were important socio-religious sites. In rituals, the acrobat is a symbol of good, as an eagle, the sun, and order. And this is contrasted by the rope. So the rope symbolizes chaos, darkness, and snakes and dragons. And, there's lots of symbology behind snakes and dragons. But tightrope walking is about 6,000 years old as a ritual. And it's even mentioned as part of the installation of Ramses II in Heliopolis, which is literally the city of the sun. And so it's been an important ritual component. Here you can see, sorry, I should have set this up. Now I'm going to show you some really ancient acrobatic ritual stuff. Obviously, here's some Egyptian things. You can see here in the third register, the one that's got a red border around it, women dancing and performing kind of different things, juggling. And this actually comes to relate to Inanna and the hulupu tree. So again, the circle is a symbol of perfection, of the sun. Pomegranates, they relate to fertility and control. And so the hulupu tree is the tree of life. And this is part of a Sumerian myth. So the tree represents cosmic order. This is the axis mundi. And so there's an ancient eternal kind of battle between the bird of prey, the eagle, and the serpent. And the serpent is the essentially the guardian of the tree of knowledge, and obviously that flows into the to the Christian tale of the serpent and in the Garden of Eden, Eden being a garden of immortality. There were many gardens of Edens across the ancient world. So Inanna, she confronts the snake to claim the tree, asserting herself over chaos and enabling fertility and life. So Inanna actually trickles down and comes to India to become Durga, who also replaces Indra, the Vedic god, as the god of war. So there is a lot of influence from the Near East of gods that come into India at some point. And so Ishtar Inanna is also Venus Durga. And the reason for the 8-pointed star is that it takes 8 years for Venus to do its loop and come back to the same point where it starts. If you're not so familiar with the Bible, in the Bible, Jesus and Lucifer they are both called the morning star, which is also Venus. But in ancient Greek texts, the Lucifer doesn't equal Satan. Satan is actually the power. Satanas is the power that expresses this reality. And in ancient Greek texts, Satanas refers to the god Apollo. So, yeah, it gets a bit tricky. But knots and rope are really interesting to think about. Not a rope as a symbol. So when you have the pole and the ropes, they come to symbol the order. You know, if you can get a pole to stand upright, then this is a symbol of order. But rope is very old, at least 20,000 years old. And perhaps some of you know that you can encode information into knots. This was a way to transmit secret information, and it's also a way to install power in magic rituals. And so that makes me think about the ropes that are used in these rituals, these acrobatic pole climbing rituals. Was there something more to the ropes than just being, stabilizers? And you see in that image here, from the 16th century, there's a wizard who was selling magic wind knots, or trying to at least. Excuse me. So it's important for us to think about, the difference between ritual and ceremony and amusement and entertainment. One of the things that the acrobats did was perform at the edge of life itself. The many accounts like Yelikas of dying while performing. And tragically, this sometimes happens today with acrobats. They fall from a great height and that's the end. But rope walking is a symbolic crossing over, just like climbing a pole. And so these feats of danger, they're exciting. There's a demonstration of otherworldly power to overcome fear. the focus and the concentration, and this would gain the god's attention. And also possibly one rationalization is that it was because the gods entered and possessed the acrobat, that they could perform such wondrous acts. And so that's how the acrobat as a ritual instrument is involved in necromancy and sorcery. And here is you can't see it, but if I color the line in, that's the rope. And so these are the sarugaku. Saru means monkey in Japanese. And today sarugaku it's like any other kind of acrobatic, performance. You might see it on the street or at a temple as part of at a festival. And in Japanese, matsuri means festival, but it actually relates to, it's a religious festival. It's not just a festival where we go and, okay, yeah, there can be fun and merrymaking because that is an important part of ritual. Think about Carnival in Europe, how, it is an ancient ritual, but it is also fun and merrymaking today. A mask is an important part of ritual because it symbolizes possession by a god, typically. And this is also links in with the shishimai, the lion dance. And so that also came from China and possibly further to the west, actually. So yeah, here you can see the sword dance. Clearly, I would not like to do that dance. The performance was a display of godlike power for a godlike person. And in the ancient, some of the Greek texts at least, so what they would do, the sword dance, they would set up swords in a circle, and maybe there would be concentric rings, and the acrobat would run and jump and do a somersault and hopefully not, get cut and die. And some at the Greek literature on the symposia, the different people there, some of them think that the acrobat is a moral character, and others think no, they're not. They're debased, and we shouldn't be too worried about acrobats. It's interesting. So yeah, the acrobats help to attract the gods, it would seem. That's what people used to think. Maybe, I mean, if I see some amazing acrobat, like a Cirque du Soleil, so, wow, I mean, it seems like that's godlike for sure. So in here in this image, this is the Hittites. So the Hittites actually, before the Hittite language is actually related to Sanskrit. It's even older than the Sanskrit, classical Sanskrit that I think about. We used to think that it was a Semitic language, but it's Indo-European. And this is an acrobat who's climbing up a ladder without using his hands, and the bigger character has a sword, is swallowing a sword. So yeah, it's really important that we go beyond just I get it all the time when I start talking about acrobats and people just think, oh, circus performers, there was something more that at least before they used to have a really important role, but that changed. And one of them was securing the king's power and prosperity for the kingdom. You can see in this image right in the middle, there is a pole which looks like it has a mushroom top, and there's a rope around it. The Indian myth of the Mantana, where the Devas and the Asuras pulled the snake to churn the ocean to get the poison and the amrit. The devas and the asuras actually represent the southern and northern hemispheres. It's astronomically based myth, and the pole, which is Indra's pole, that symbolizes the sun at the summer solstice, which is the International Day of Yoga, right? These are just different words for Greek-related acrobat stuff. You can read this later. In ancient Greek, the word thaumatron means a marvelous act or spectacle. And so conceptually, we can think of an acrobat as an instrument of wonder in this way, even if it would seem that's not a term that was used to describe acrobats, but they were still part of this. I mean, the concept fits, you can say. So this is a pottery, a spinning disc you use to make pottery, and so the acrobat is spinning around on that while doing a handstand. So yeah, thoma plus tropos means thaumatrope, and so this is a which then kind of leads into the idea of a miracle worker. So this is how an acrobat was described in ancient Greek, as being a miracle worker. And ancient acrobats, so a series of rapid bodily postures blend into one flowing movement. And so this is a kinetic persistence of form, where the audience perceives continuous grace. And the wonder lies in balance, inversion, and rotation of body. The acrobat creates motion that feels like illusion. So you've probably seen this this bull jumping. It's possible that the bull, while this is a dangerous act, no doubt, of jumping over a bull, people still do this today. You can find footage of it, at the rodeo, for example, where people will do the bull will charge at them, and they'll just literally jump over the bull as it charges at them. But it's possible that the bull, symbolizes Taurus, the constellation in the sky. And this is from Morocco, it's this acrobat. He won the contest of running and jumping on and off the horse, which was all of these rituals are either part of creating prosperity or through like ordering chaos. And here you can see the clearly a difficult thing to achieve. So the acrobat converts the discontinuous into the continuous and the impossible into the perceivable, turning gravity-bound flesh into weightless motion. And this vase on the left is, I think, from the 19th century, but it's a replica of an image. And you can see here that it's dated to the 6th century BCE, an acrobatic performance that was part of a ritual. So you can see on the far right, someone is climbing the pole. There's an acrobat. The Pyrrhian dance is an important martial type of dance, which is very similar to that lezim, that thing I showed you with the kind of the bow with the metal rope. That's also a very similar kind of dance. And this is what the is said there. The kalos toi kobested hoi. Well done, acrobat. Good for the tumbler. Now, the world's oldest acrobats are actually called hupu. And this is from ancient Sumeria and in Syria, in the kind of the top northeast corner of modern day Syria. And Ebla was a famous town that was known for producing acrobats. And they performed at the festival of the goddess Ishtar, who was Inanna or Venus, or became Durga in India. And the Hupu were and performed at the end of the ceremony, after the wrestlers, after the lamentation priests. So they were the most important. And they also performed to celebrate the return of the king or the arrival of special visitors or any religious festival. And there's archaeological evidence, like anthropological evidence from skeletons to show that these people were, because of all of the training, they had developed stronger tendons, and the tendon grooves in their ankles, for example, were more developed than a normal person. And this is a cuneiform. It's called the coach tablet. It was a letter basically written by the coach, and he describes how the acrobats, so they would play, act, fight in a range of bold, dynamic actions, like jumping over things, spinning around, tumbling, and all this. And this is called the Arjan Bowl because it is from the town called Arjan. And this bowl, it represents, it's cosmological. So that the different registers from the outside to the inside, with the innermost one being where the king is. So everyday kind of life is depicted. And then you have the innermost register. And that's what is highlighted here. So you can see that there are musicians playing harps. And if you read ancient Greek, pre-Christian ancient Greek texts, the most important ritual element is the guitarist, the harpist. And so the guitarist and the music and the consumption of drugs is what creates ionic life, which is not immortality in that sense, but it's probably actually quite close to the concept of Jivan Mukti in some way. Maybe we could make that connection. But you can see how there are people walking on stilts and also doing some sort of hand walking. And here's just a close-up of it. You can get a better look at the. Now this image is from Turkmenistan, the Bactria Margiana archaeological complex. So when the Vedic speaking Aryans, when they left southern Ukraine, southern Russia, they traveled through Turkmenistan, and it's in this Bactria Margiana archaeological complex. That is where that they picked up the drug Soma and then took it with them to South Asia. And there's a lot of interesting archaeological evidence to show that they were mixing several different drugs like cannabis and Soma. Soma, which is most likely a mushroom, that like the Amanita muscaria, the same one that the Siberian shamans linked with the colors of Santa Claus today. And if you look at this could possibly, the dogs in the sky, the ones who have climbed the pole, you'll see the ones that are in the sky, they have an erect penis. That's not their arm, that's a penis. So that could symbolize the ecstatic state of the ritual acrobat here. And you've got the drumming, and you've also got what look like the symbols that a Central Asian shaman has. But then it could also be pointing to Sirius. And so when Sirius sets in the night sky, that symbolizes autumn. So there's starting to think more astronomical here. Yeah, there's I could say more about this, but these quite likely also were influenced from stuff from Egypt, and this is again coming back to Egypt. Think about Sirius, just pointing out. This is the feast of the sky, and you can clearly see that there is what it symbolizes a pole, and this connects to the foreleg of the bull. Oh, sorry, it connects to the tail of the bull, Ursa Minor, which is the plow, the Big Dipper. And here is this is Min. Min is the fertility god, and you can clearly see in the image of the right the erect penis, and also the arm. This is the arm. Well, this you could say there's two poles being symbolized there, but Min came from to the east of Egypt, and Min's festival included erecting a pole. So the erection of a pole, again, it symbolizes law and order, royal power, and then once those things are established, then prosperity for the kingdom can occur. And part of that involved erecting the pole, and then there would be some sort of competition, a ritual competition to climb the pole. And these images just show you some close-ups of the hieroglyphs. And there was also the Sed festival, which also raised a pole. And here you can see some of it. If you look closely, you can. It's the image on the right is a copy of the photo. And here, this is called the lettuce scene. And so the figure is holding two lettuce, and the white sap of a lettuce, when you cut a lettuce and that white sap, symbolically that represents semen, and that's actually offered to Min's penis to power the fertility ritual. Which also symbolizes the Milky Way. And the Great Rift. So there is a point in the galaxy which is said to be the center of the galaxy, and it would seem that all of this, these pole climbing acrobats, that's where they're trying to climb to. If you don't know about the precession of the equinoxes, there are several pole stars, and the current pole star is Polaris. And because the Earth is said to be tilting on an angle as it spins around, that's how you get this precession. And so every roughly 2,500 years, the pole star changes, and you can see how Polaris is connected to the Big Dipper, which is upside down. Now, before the question was asked about the meditative dancing and things, the arhats is a term from Buddhism, and so this is about this is a ritual dance which combines the steps that mimic the northern dipper and the mystic spirals. So you have heaven and earth. So this kind of gets a bit. This involves alchemy and hermeticism, and which are also very much the goal. Like Hatha Yoga takes alchemical principles and fashions the body into the site for alchemy to occur. So these things relate in many ways. So this dance was performed by acrobats, and it was, basically some trance-inducing dance that involved the summoning of spirits. This was necromancy. This was sorcery, and so the Big Dipper you can see here in this on the left, the wagon, as it's called in many cultures. Essentially, the dance involved. I don't know how to do the dance. I'm not good at dancing, so I'm not going to try and perform it for you. But so there were two things that would occur. So there were, while you were dancing, you would be performing a certain sequence of positions, of body position, and also thinking, visualizing within yourself this map of the cosmos, and also performing some mental alchemy as well. And with each position, there were different, say, chakras that you would focus on, and different deities or different gods, different powers that you would then also think about and activate. And so this image on the left is kind of like the one on the left, top left image. You can see how it's kind of like like walking a labyrinth from the entrance all the way into the middle. It seems like it's similar to that. So, now some people don't agree, and that the symbol of the swastika is based on the movement of the Big Dipper around the pole star. But some people say that that's what it could be based on. And so in many myths, when we die, our soul goes on a journey through the wagon, well, in the wagon, the Big Dipper, to the pole star. And so that's what this dance is essentially linked to. And of course, we have this famous image. And so it's believed that the eyes of the bull represent Vega, and the eyes of the bird represent Altair, and the eyes of the birdman represent Deneb. And I'll just go back quickly to. So here is Deneb and Vega, and where is Altair? So these are pole stars. That's what the eyes of these three characters in this image are said to represent, and together they create what's called the summer triangle. And so here you can see that. Now this then relates to what's called the summer triangle then forms the constellation of Cygnus, the swan, which is Saraswati's vehicle, and it's linked to also to Venus. And so Cygnus represents the cosmic pole of the axis mundi, which is the acrobat's pole. And the Devanagari in the top left, this is from the Bhagavad Gita. Ashvata sarva vrikshanam devashinam cha narada gandharvanam chitrataha siddhanam kapilo muni. And the pink highlighted, this is the word Ashvata, and that means the sacred fig tree. And sarva vrikshanam, so basically it's saying, basically Krishna is saying that of all of the sacred trees, I'm it. I'm the big tree. So Krishna is calling himself the Axis Mundi. And the Axis Mundi is symbolized in the night sky. So the Axis Mundi being the tree that connects the earth to the heavens is symbolizes the Milky Way. And so here on the left, you can see where Cygnus is positioned. And I haven't highlighted it, but on the right circle, you can see Taurus. And then that image with the dogs in the sky from Turkmenistan, and the bull is pointing to the right. It could be pointing at Taurus. I mean, I don't know, and the dogs also could be linked to Hecate. So Hecate is an ancient goddess from the Mediterranean, and she has black dogs, and there's a whole kind of thing about that as well, but which is linked to Medea, where the word medicine comes from. So here you have the summer triangle, which makes up the Cygnus rift, Vega, Deneb, and Altair. And here again, you can see Deneb. Oh, sorry, Cygnus. Perhaps some of you know about Göbekli Tepe or all of the tepes that are in Turkey, but there are many sites and more keep getting found. And these are Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe. Tepe just means hill, and so this is where the Hittites, where I showed you before with the acrobat walking up the ladder without using the hands. This is Hittite country. And so these sites are 11,000, dated to about 11,000 years old. And they are essentially ancient astronomical observatories. Excuse me. And again, we find birds, and we find poles, and we find erect penises. And so it would seem that this is a recurrent theme. There's something about it. So Göbekli Tepe particularly is famous for these T-shaped pillars that they weigh several tons. You know, they're like Stonehenge in what they possibly. How were they built? But it maps quite accurately the ancient constellations, as you can see with the overlaying on the far left image. So yeah, it's fascinating. The Göbekli Tepe is absolutely fascinating. There's more I could say. And so here at Göbekli Tepe, in the image in the middle, you can see how there is a man with an erect penis, and he has two wild animals on each side of him. And so this is some sort of shaman priest, it would seem, and it's quite clearly repeated in the clay seal from Mohenjo-daro, or the Pashupati seal, which a lot of people mistake for being somehow related to yoga. It was actually a clay seal that was worn on your arm, that symbolized your social rank as a priest. I think a lot of people 4,500 years ago were probably sitting cross-legged on the ground or on a seat. So is that the origins of Hatha Yoga? Certainly not. Hatha Yoga doesn't emerge until maybe 1,000 years ago. It's linked to Tantric Buddhism and Bundas initially. So there's a long way in between. But it also, you can see how in the far left with the Celtic god Cernunnos from the Gundestrup cauldron in Denmark, that there's similarity here of some sort of shaman type priest who gains control over nature, and this is thought to be around the time that our ancestors moved from being hunting cults to herding cults, where we gained the power to actually start domesticating animals.
Patrick, may I interrupt
Yeah.
you? Because
Yeah.
we still have 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes left. So I don't know if you want to. This is a very passionate presentation and
Yeah,
we have
I've
a
got one
lot
more
of
slide
material.
left.
Yes.
I've
Okay.
got one more
Thanks.
slide left. Yeah. So yeah, sorry. So this seems to relate to the again, this image that I showed you on the front of the slide, which is Ten no Shime. Sorry, I didn't take out all of the Japanese, but basically, again, the ritual symbolizes the route of climbing up into the heaven, and it seems to link to the oldest kind of myths that humanity collectively has, and that links to, there was an age where the story is that the heaven used to be much closer to the earth, and for whatever reason it then started to float away, and so that's why the shaman has to go up through this shamanic act of ascending to then come down. So I know that that's well, it's a cosmic way to end, but what I hope I could demonstrate to you is two things. That there's the well, this only I could talk until your ears bleed on this. I have so much I could say, but really, it's still a work in progress. But I think at least with the contortionist turn, I can explain some possibilities. I'm not saying this is definitive at all, but I think it helps us to better understand actually the cosmic relationship that acrobats have to human religion, which is lost, and that at least could be a way to explain how acrobatic performance was incorporated into the ritual performance of yogis, and then what we have today. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. It is always so useful, necessary, and interesting to get different point of views from the classical narratives. So definitely that is what you are doing when you analyze such topics. I don't know if we have some questions from the participants. A few had to left because of the time, but maybe would you like to ask Patrick some question while we still have time? I was wondering, do you have detailed information about some of these, maybe the most famous acrobats or wrestlers? Are they mentioned individually in the text, or do they stay anonymous?
In the Mala Purana, no, there's no wrestler is mentioned by name, except I guess because the Mala Purana is part mythology. It's they are Brahmins, and the history is that you have the Mongols and Turks coming down from Central Asia and plundering and pillaging northwest India, so Gujarat particularly. And so some of that is linked to this response by these Brahmin communities who want to learn how to fight. And the story begins with Krishna and his brother Balrama coming back to where they lived in West Gujarat. And along the way, they go through this village, and the villagers are like, "Wow, it's Krishna and Balrama! Wow, oh, can you please like teach us wrestling?" And Krishna's like, "Sure, sure." But then Balrama's like, "Do we have to? Can we just go home?"
Mm.
So that those two people, because they have a big famous wrestling fight in the Mahabharata in Mathura, so where they kill King Kamsa and Krishna's uncle, who's trying to always kill Krishna.
Mm.
So in the Mala Purana, that they're really the only two people who are mentioned. Yeah.
Okay. That makes me think also about because they are not doing it for fertility or prosperity festival, but you know about the Lakota Indians from
Mm.
the American plains, because they are
Mm.
practicing through poles and with uh, very strenuous uh, balancing and hurting themselves and so on, but for
Yes, yes, yes.
strictly spiritual reasons. And they are practicing before fasting, meditation, rituals, and so on. So this is still
Mm.
a living tradition in this
Mm.
part of the world.
This sky dance, no?
Yeah, it's looking at the sun, it is called.
Yeah, yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
looking at the sun. And it is a way to address the cycle of life and death.
There is a similar cult in India. So even like the Chinese, the Chinese scholar who famously came to India and studied and
Mm.
took Buddhism back. He mentions that when he goes to Varanasi, that there are these people that just do a similar thing where they hang from hooks and stare at the sun, right? The same
Mm,
thing.
mm. That's right.
And he describes it as an ancient cult, and that was,
Mm.
already a long time ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's there's something shared, isn't there? Like
Yeah,
related to
archetypal.
yeah, archetypal exactly. And
Mm, mm.
so trying to link it all together is perhaps I might lose people when I'm talking about it a bit, but if you can find your own connection, then that's also great. So
Exactly. And we are very thankful to you for opening this field of thinking to us.
Oh, no, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Anyone? Do you have a comment or a remark? Okay. Then we shall maybe close the session.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much.
Wait.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for attending, all of you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for the
Allowing
time.
us to have this event happen.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. Hopefully, you learned something, and maybe we can do it again.
Yeah, it's good to share together. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.